Oh, that's good. I keep having this nagging feeling that I've forgotten something.
Hey, if you forgot it, it probably wasn't all that important.
Yeah, I guess.
Hey, what's going on, guys? You're watching the Modding Corner, and I'm back with another Yapping Corner segment, or whatever I'm gonna call these more chill type of videos. So today we're gonna talk about the Sparking Zero Switch situation, because oh my god, man. Now, with Sparking Zero originally released on the Switch, I didn't really see much problems with it. For what is essentially a demake of a modern game for older hardware, I think they did about as good of a job as they could have capturing the same vibe of the game. I feel like this release kind of went under the radar. I mean, compared to the other versions of the game, there's really not much to say besides the fact that they added motion controls, which, I'ma just be honest, suck. They're terrible. I like they might genuinely be worse than the Tenkaichi ones on the Wii. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys. And the unique but strangely cool 3v3 mode you can do, because you could play with up to 6 different players on Sparking Zero for the Switch, which has actually made the game really fun at, like, you know, gatherings and stuff, and whenever I feel like pulling it out for, you know, me and the homies to hop on. And even still, back then I made a Sparking Zero short covering the Nintendo Switch version because Bandai gave me a free copy. Shout out Bandai for that. That was pretty cool. Though the one thing I got on their case about with that was the fact that the DLC that was currently available for the console editions at the time, that being the Superhero Pack and Diamond Pack 1 at the time, Diamond Pack 2 was pretty close to coming out as well, just wasn't available on there, and we didn't really have an idea of when they were coming to the Switch besides the quote-unquote release dates they usually put on the Nintendo eShop, which are most of the time placeholder dates. Most of the stuff that says that on there likely comes out a lot sooner than it does. So when I first saw that, I was thinking, surely they're not gonna just wait to release characters we already have on the other versions. I mean, that would just be stupid. I mean, we know that they're playable, we've seen all their moves. It's not like the Sparking Zero DLCs really add that much content outside of the characters included, so it shouldn't take that long to port all that stuff over to the Switch version of the game, right? Right? To put into context, Sparking Zero for the Switch came out back in November of 2025. It is January, and we are just getting the Superhero Pack. What the are we doing, Bandai? Like actually, what the are we doing? Because there is no way it should be taking that long to get the DLC to the Switch version of the game. And granted, I know they basically have to kind of remake everything from scratch, right? Because assuming that, like, this is like a demake in a sense where, like, they basically kind of had to, like, recompile the game's code and everything to work on 8th generation hardware, and it can be shown just like in the stages. I mean, like, some of the stages look drastically different in the Switch version. It, like, you know, runs a little slower, but still a lot of the framework is already done. I'm not gonna say like it's as easy as just copy and paste, but like it shouldn't take as long as it did for the console to get it, right? Because, like, when you see the gap between the original release of Sparking Zero and its first DLC, it came out around the same time, because Sparking Zero originally came out in October, and that first Superhero Pack came out sometime in February, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check on my phone real quick. Yeah, it actually came out last January, so that DLC is a full year old. And again, they likely had the Switch version in development at the time, so they knew they would have had to port these characters over eventually, so I'm surprised they didn't just work on that alongside the game itself, you know? So Sparking Zero came out originally in October 2024. We get the first DLC in January 2025. Sparking Zero Switch comes out in November 25, and we get the first DLC in February of 26. It should not take the same amount of dev time to make that happen. I'm sorry, like, the assets are basically already there. It shouldn't take no more than at most generous 2 months. Like, this should have been out. Like, it'd be one thing if we were already on the point where it's like, okay, now we're getting Daima Pack 3, which means the Switch versions can finally release alongside the console versions, because the console versions are getting new stuff. We're getting a big summer update coming up, and we got Mission 100 that they just added not too long after Genkidamatsuri. So it's like, does that mean the Switch players aren't getting that stuff until 2027 potentially? Cause that sucks. Me personally, I'm not playing the game primarily on Switch. I don't make content primarily on Switch, but if the Switch was my only option, which for a lot of people it is, I'd be pissed. Like, why are we so behind? You know? And like, in my mind, I'm trying to like find what excuse they could have behind it, because I know Sparking Zero on the Switch is run by a different studio, because again, it's like more so of a demake than anything. And like, I'm not the kind of person who's like rush the game, because that's how we ended up with Sparking Zero's base release. But at the same time though, when you're making what is essentially a demake, it's not like you have to remake all of those assets to be like one-to-one with the original release. Like, in my opinion, it just shouldn't take that long. It really shouldn't take long to add some characters to the game. Like, what difference are they focusing on? Is it the motion controls? Like, they're busy around figuring out inputs for the special beam cannon or something? Like, and the announcement for the DLC was very abrupt. I mean, they announced more Sparking Zero DLC back at the Genkidamatsuri, but they were radio silent on the Switch versions, because they basically said, hey, this stuff's coming for PlayStation, PC, Switch players, good luck. You know? And then we got an abrupt announcement from, I believe it was just the Dragon Ball Games Twitter was the only outlet that really spoke on this DLC coming. I'd have to double check if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I like, that's the only place I was where nobody talks about it. Like, I feel like this is like a situation that like kind of like affects more people, and then we're letting on, and then just no one's saying anything about it, so like we're just letting it slide, apparently. I think it's a little like, you know, up to the Switch players, in my opinion at least. Like, because it's pretty lame that like most of the Nintendo Dragon Ball games get released a year behind, but at least when they release, they're caught up. For example, Xenoverse came out 2016, it came out on the Switch 2017, which makes sense, that was the Switch's first year, so they got that on there immediately. Same with Fighters. Fighters came out in 2018. I think it came out on the Switch either in 2019 or 2020. I just know it wasn't on Switch at launch. But when it did release, it came with all of the DLC that the other versions had at the time. So there was no reason to really like, you know, not have the Switch version compared to the others. You know, we were all kind of like one game, one hype. You know, and that's typically how it should be with Dragon Ball games. And you would think they know that lesson now, because, for example, Dokkan for so long was split up between the Japanese version and the global version until like a year ago, where they finally said, let's just combine the versions, because it's not the 2000s anymore. You could just look at what's going on in Japan. They like there's no reason for like region differences anymore at this point. We know what's going on over there, right? So I think it's just still like kind of crazy that like Nintendo players are just like a year behind when it comes down to most releases. And again, the Switch is worse hardware compared to the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series and the PC. But at the same time, like, I get why it takes them a year to release that stuff on Switch. Why is it a year behind, especially when the DLC is very shallow? I don't know. I really don't know. I can't get it. I mean, if they're gonna take this long with it, they might as well release a PlayStation 4 version, because there isn't like no like PS4, like the PS4 and the Switch one are like relatively on the same level of hardware. If you could get Marvel Rivals to run on a PS4, you can get Sparking Zero to run on a PS4 without too much trouble, right? So like at this point, you might as well make a PS4 version if you want to capitalize on a much larger audience, you know. And another thing that's kind of pissing me off is that like they're like still charging you full price on the DLCs, even though they're a lot later. Like, I can't in good faith recommend the Switch version to people, knowing that like if you like the Switch, you can get the Switch version only if that's your only option. If you don't have a PC or you don't want to get a PS5 or a Series X, which in this economy I don't blame you for. Like, if you got your one console and you want to stick to it, that's fine. But you know, knowing what we know about Sparking Zero's first 3 DLCs, me personally, I don't think they're really worth the purchase at full price. So I know it must doubly suck being a Switch player, and we don't know what we're getting, like, concretely yet in that summer update, but I would just hate to be a Switch player just basically being left behind for that, you know? I just feel like that blows, you know? And I feel like the only way they can fix that is to kind of just speed up that dev process. So hopefully we can get the Switch and console versions on the same track by at least the end of the year. Though I do think it's funny how this has just always been a consistent thing with Dragon Ball games on Nintendo consoles, because Nintendo consoles just always seem to get the short end of the stick when it comes down to the Dragon Ball games. Because typically, like, even since like the GameCube and Wii era, like, we've just been getting Dragon Ball games on Nintendo just a year after they come out everywhere else. And I thought the way the Switch handled it was fine, because, you know, we would get the games on the main big platforms first and then the Switch the following year. But it comes with everything the console versions had up until that point. And it's like with Sparking Zero, I just don't see the pass. You know, I just don't see the pass. Like, what makes Sparking Zero different to be delayed for this long? And again, it'd be another thing if, like, it released without the DLC and it's just like, oh, we gotta wait a couple weeks, maybe a month, maybe 2 months, but 4 months, 4 months, Bandai, come on, man, that's unacceptable. That is just unacceptable, which means at the rate we're going, we're not gonna get Mission 100 until maybe December or like next year, 27, and then, you know, whenever the summer update comes out and that DLC comes out, we might have Age 1000 by then. Who knows? We might even have Xenoverse 3 by then, you know? But yeah, that's besides the point. In conclusion, Nintendo is always a year behind on Dragon Ball games, but at least back then you didn't know you were getting. Nowadays, you know you got. You know, back then you found out later you got being a Nintendo player, but now you're actively getting being a Nintendo player. So anyway, I hope this video helps. Again, don't buy Sparking Zero on the Switch if you have literally any other option. If not, if you're still interested in just getting, you know, Beast Gohan and, you know, the hype characters from the second Diamond Pack. I know nobody give a shit about that first Diamond Pack. I'm not gonna lie to you, that might be the worst one. Even though it does have my Goku. Oh, I love Ku. He's funny. But yeah, I'd still heavily recommend just waiting for a sale. Don't even buy it when it releases. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed another Yapping Corner segment. Here's the outro.